I never thought a regular suitcase could flip my world upside down, until I opened it and realized none of the stuff inside belonged to me. My name's Jason Leary. I'm 34, working as a UX designer in Denver, Colorado, where I help shape digital interfaces for a rising tech startup. My wife, Elise Hartman, 32, works as the creative director at a top-tier ad agency right in the middle of downtown. We've built our life in a stylish loft over in Reno, the kind of place where inspiration hangs in the air like the smell of fresh espresso. We first met 8 years ago at a design conference down in Austin. Her confidence, her sharp mind, and that unforgettable smile, yeah, I was hooked from the jump. After 3 years of dating, we tied the knot, and among our creative circle, we became what people like to call a power couple. Sounds like a dream, right? That's what I thought too. Until things started to shift. Lately, Elise has been acting different. She's been going on more and more business trips, always saying she has client meetings for some big campaign she's leading. I started catching little moments, her smiling at her phone like it was whispering something sweet, or suddenly looking away when I glanced over. When I reached out, I chalked up her distant vibe to work stress. Elise has always been laser-focused on her career, so I figured it made sense. Still, something didn't sit right with me. There was this low-grade tension in my gut I couldn't shake. It started off small, maybe a dinner date she bailed on, or staying late at the office. But slowly, that uneasy feeling grew louder, like static cutting into a once clear signal. Now, before diving too deep into this roller coaster, let me ask, where are you reading this from? Drop your city in the comments, and if this story has your attention, hit that follow button. Trust me, what's coming next? It'll have you hanging on every word. It was one of those typical Denver nights, drizzling, overcast, the kind of cold that settles in your bones while the city hummed quietly outside. I was holed up in my home office, polishing a design prototype. The glow from my monitor cut through the shadows in our bedroom. Elise was packing for a trip to LA, her flight scheduled for early the next morning. I could hear her humming some unfamiliar tune in the background. Normally, I'd tease her about her singing voice, but that night, I just sat at my desk, silent. Something held me back. Maybe it was instinct, maybe fate, whatever it was about to change everything I knew. I finished up my work earlier than planned and wandered toward the bedroom, thinking I'd lend a hand. The sound of water hitting the shower tiles echoed softly. Elise was getting ready, and her suitcase lay open on the bed, half-packed, her clothes neatly folded the way she always did it. Draped over the edge was her favorite silk scarf, a soft shade of blue that stood out against the black leather of the case. I smiled, thinking how she always forgot little things, like a charger or a pack of tissues. I figured I'd quietly tuck something in, just to let her know I was thinking of her. As I lifted the top layer of shirts, my fingers brushing over the smooth fabric, something unexpected caught my eye. Tucked beneath was a flash of deep red. I froze for a second, then slowly pulled it out. My breath hitched when I realized what I was holding, a crimson lingerie set, delicate and bold. Not something she'd ever worn for me. My heart started to race. I tried telling myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe it was supposed to be a surprise, something special Elise had planned for the two of us. That's what I told myself, grasping for anything that made sense. But then I noticed a small package tucked into the side of the suitcase. My hand shook as I reached for it. A box of condoms. Brand new. No mistaking it. The room seemed to tilt, like gravity had suddenly shifted. My chest pounded so hard, I could barely hear the steady rhythm of the shower anymore. I just stood there, frozen, staring down at the evidence in my hands. My mind spun in a panic. Elise and I hadn't needed condoms in years, not once during our marriage. And that lingerie? It wasn't meant for me. Not like this. The truth slammed into me, sharp and undeniable. This trip to L.A., she was bringing those things for someone else. The water shut off. Panic surged through me, but I shoved it down hard. Quickly, I tucked everything back where I'd found it, smoothing the shirts over them like nothing had happened. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to stay composed. Elise stepped out a moment later, wrapped in a towel, water still dripping from her shoulders. She looked at me, completely unaware. She flashed that smile, the one that used to mean everything to me. I swallowed the wave of nausea rising in my throat and forced myself to return the gesture. "Don't stay away too long," I said, keeping my voice strangely calm. "I've got something special waiting for you when you get back." She nodded with a soft, unsuspecting look and turned to dry her hair, completely unaware of what I'd just uncovered. I left the room with my face composed, but inside, a storm was building. I didn't plan to confront her right away. No, I'd play along, on my terms. Whatever she was hiding, I was going to drag it into the light. And when I did, she'd wish she never zipped up that suitcase. Morning came faster than I was ready for, hitting hard. I hadn't slept a second. My mind kept looping through the images, the crimson lingerie, the unopened box of condoms, like some riddle I couldn't unsee. Elise was up before dawn, moving around quietly so she wouldn't wake me. I stayed still, eyes half open, watching the sunlight creep across the ceiling. The storm outside had passed, but inside me, it was just getting started. The rain had stopped, but the air was still thick, damp in a way that clung to everything. I heard the sharp sound of her suitcase zipping shut from the living room. Each click felt like a ticking clock, counting down to the moment everything would unravel. I stayed in bed a little longer, wrapped in its false comfort, before pulling on my old gray hoodie to fight off the morning chill. Elise was by the door, slipping into her coat, her black hair neatly pulled back, every detail of her appearance polished and precise. She looked like she belonged to some world far removed from mine, stepping into it with a kind of purpose I wasn't supposed to see. I walked over to the kitchen, my hand wrapping around a coffee mug more for balance than warmth. Her eyes met mine briefly, and there was something there, something I couldn't quite name. Guilt maybe, or fear. I kept my face still, taking strength from the heat of the mug in my hands. "Want me to drive you?" I asked, keeping my tone even, almost indifferent, though I could feel the storm tightening in my chest. She gave a quick shake of her head and adjusted her bag. "I already called an Uber," she said. "No need to mess up your morning," she said, her smile stiff, not quite touching her eyes. I nodded slowly, raising my cup again, letting the moment stretch. "Safe flight. And don't forget, your surprise will be waiting when you get back." Her mouth twitched at that, barely reacting as she mumbled a quick, "Thanks," before slipping out the door. The soft click of it closing felt louder than it should have. I stayed where I was, staring at the space she'd just left. My coffee was already going cold in my hands. That moment, quiet, still, cemented everything for me. Waiting around wasn't going to cut it. I set the cup down and moved, heading for the bedroom with purpose. My chest thudded, each step pushing me forward. Her suitcase might have gone with her, but she was still in the room somehow. The scent of her perfume lingered in the air, soft but undeniable. I scanned everything with fresh eyes, looking for anything she'd missed, anything that might show a crack in the polished image she presented. That's when I noticed her nightstand drawer, slightly ajar. I crossed the room in 3 quick steps and slowly pulled it open. The drawer was a mess, no surprise there. Lip balm nearly used up, a random pen, crumpled receipts scattered around. But then I saw it, barely hidden under a wrinkled post-it note, a hotel key card. Plain white with a strange logo I didn't recognize. My hand moved before I could think, fingers brushing against the smooth plastic that sent a cold jolt through me. I flipped it over, nothing. No hotel name, no room number. Just the stripe and a tiny nick in the corner. My gut twisted. Was this something she forgot to throw away? Or was it ready and waiting for another secret rendezvous? I slid it into my pocket, mind already churning through 100 ugly possibilities. Then my phone buzzed on the bed, making me jump. I grabbed it, half expecting a text from Nora saying she forgot something. But it wasn't her, it was a notification from our shared credit card. A charge had just gone through, $200 at a boutique in Belltown. I scrolled down, heart pounding, and found another identical charge from last week. I couldn't recall her wearing anything new from that place. Belltown wasn't even her usual shopping spot, she preferred the quieter, more refined boutiques around Pike Place. My finger hovered above the screen for a moment, uncertain, before I finally tapped the store's link. The page took its time loading, but once it did, my chest tightened. Lingerie. Expensive, bold, and unmistakably like the set I'd seen in her suitcase. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were inching inward, squeezing the air out. I became aware of the key card in my pocket, pressing into my thigh like a silent accusation. She'd bought that scarlet set just yesterday, mere hours before laying it carefully into her luggage. This wasn't for me. It wasn't some spontaneous gesture meant to revive us. It was deliberate. Intentional. Just like the condoms. Every piece packed with purpose, for someone else. Someone waiting for her in LA. My fists clenched without thinking, the urge to call her overwhelming. I wanted answers, right then and there. But I held back. Confronting her now wouldn't work. If I revealed what I knew, she'd spin excuses, bury me in lies, leaving me with nothing but the hollow sound of her words. I couldn't let that happen. I paced back and forth, my shadow flickering across the floor like a restless specter. No, she wouldn't get away with this that easily. I had to be patient, watchful, dig deeper into the key card and the strange transactions. It was a trail, and I'd follow it wherever it led. I grabbed my laptop from the study and set myself up at the kitchen table, the gray Seattle skyline looming through the window like a storm waiting to break. I searched the boutique's name along with Los Angeles hotels. Nothing solid came up, but I wasn't done. I'd find where she was staying, who she was with. And once I had the proof, there'd be no way for her to deny it. The coffee sat untouched, stone cold on the counter, forgotten in my pursuit. I leaned back in my chair, keycard in one hand, phone in the other. Nora probably thought she had it all figured out, flying off to LA with her hidden agenda, thinking I was still the same Caleb, trusting, naive, ready to accept whatever story she fed me. But her secrets were already slipping through the cracks, unraveling under my watch. She had no idea what awaited her when she returned. There wouldn't be a warm welcome, no forgiveness. Instead, there'd be something far more unsettling, something she wouldn't see coming. The apartment felt unnervingly empty without her, even though she'd been gone less than 24 hours. I stayed seated at the kitchen table, the glow from the laptop casting a harsh light across my face. The hotel key card sat next to my computer, its frayed corner catching the light despite hours of searching, comparing boutique purchases with Los Angeles hotels. The puzzle I was piecing together was still missing critical parts. The coffee I made earlier was forgotten, its surface now covered with a thin film. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced down, expecting another credit card alert, but instead, an unfamiliar number popped up with a message, *Caleb, it's Reed Callahan. The Rhino Room tonight at 9 sharp? I know about Nora, my stomach tightened on its own, involuntarily. Reed Callahan, the CEO of Nora's agency. A man in his 40s, always impeccably dressed in cashmere, someone who commanded attention without even trying. Our paths had crossed at various company events. His handshake was always firm, his smile carefully calculated. This unexpected contact, with his cryptic mention of Nora, struck me as off. My grip on the phone tightened. The timing couldn't be a coincidence, not with everything I'd uncovered recently. I quickly typed a short reply, "See you there." I tucked the key card into my pocket and grabbed my jacket. The streets of Seattle shimmered with the remnants of the recent rain as I stepped outside, heading for the Rhino Room. Nestled in Pioneer Square, the venue greeted me with its signature dim lighting, exposed brick walls, and the soft undertones of jazz. I walked in right at 9, scanning the room for Reed. He was seated at a corner table, a glass of bourbon in hand. He gave me a slight nod, his expression unreadable. I made my way over, and as I sat down across from him, the leather seat creaked. Reed didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You look terrible, Caleb," he said, swirling his drink thoughtfully. I shrugged, not giving much away, keeping my hands tucked in my pockets, the key card pressing against my leg like a constant reminder. Long day. "What do you know about Nora?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil rising within me. Reed leaned forward, resting his elbows on the weathered table, his gaze sharp and unwavering, locking onto mine with a focus that felt almost unnerving. I've had my eye on her activities for some time now. She's not the person you think she is. He reached into his coat, pulling out a small USB drive, and slid it deliberately across the wooden surface. My pulse quickened, but I held back, resisting the urge to snatch it up immediately. "What's on it?" I asked, keeping my voice low, barely above a whisper. A smirk tugged at Reed's lips, but there was something darker in his eyes as he replied, "Evidence. Electronic correspondence, message threads, visual documentation, She's been collaborating with Jasper Ayers since summer. He's a contract photographer who's done several projects for us, but this goes beyond a simple affair. They're systematically diverting client funds through falsified billing documents." The name hit me like a gut punch. Jasper Ayers. It was more than just betrayal, it was something far deeper, and it devastated me. Jasper Ayers, the name hit me with a weight that I hadn't anticipated. I was familiar with his portfolio, those brooding, high-contrast images that Nora couldn't stop praising at social gatherings. At the time, I had dismissed it as just another one of her fleeting interests. Now, though, with everything coming together, it all aligned with disturbing clarity. I lifted the USB, turning it over in my hand, feeling its sleek surface against my skin. My muscles tensed, a reflex I couldn't control. "What's your motivation for sharing this?" I pressed, narrowing my eyes as I scrutinized his expression. Reed reclined, savoring his bourbon slowly, unhurriedly, before responding with a calmness that sent a chill down my spine. Consider it maintenance of professional standards. Nora's growing careless. She's endangering our reputation. I want to remove her, but discreetly. That's where you come in, I cocked my head, unease churning within me. "What's the ulterior motive?" I asked, wary of the manipulation beneath his smooth words. Reed. Smile. Perceptive. He leaned back slightly, then continued. I'll provide you with comprehensive evidence for her downfall. Your role, deliver this information to Helix Media in Los Angeles. Our primary competitor. Let them expose the scandal. I maintain deniability, while you achieve retribution. He paused, allowing his proposition to linger in the air like a poison. Consider the reality. Reed's voice sliced through the thick tension that hung between us, his words deliberate and laced with venom. Caleb, she's been manipulating you. The ambient noise of the bar receded as I processed his words. I focused on the USB drive in my hand, examining it like it was some foreign object, an artifact that carried the weight of everything I hadn't yet realized. Thoughts whirled, each one more suffocating than the last. This wasn't just about infidelity, it was orchestrated deception. A calculated pursuit of wealth and influence. While I had been the unwitting dupe, images of Nora arriving in LA flooded my mind, her sleek luggage in hand, Jasper waiting for her at the gate, their shared secrets tucked away behind those hotel walls. My fingers clenched around the USB. Count me in, I declared firmly, the words more of a vow than a choice. Reed nodded, finishing his drink with an air of quiet satisfaction. Excellent. Review the files. You'll understand everything. I left the bar without another word, the weight of the USB drive heavy in my pocket, a burning secret that gnawed at me. The journey home felt like a blur, city lights streaked into abstract smears of color, my mind fixated on the truth I was about to uncover. Once inside my apartment, I wasted no time. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears as I connected the drive to my laptop. The screen flickered to life, and the folders appeared like a dark promise. I clicked on the first one. Inside was a trail of messages between Nora and Jasper. At first, they seemed harmless, casual exchanges that could have been written off as professional, innocent even. But as I scrolled, the tone shifted. What began as business banter morphed into flirtation. And then, there it was, the moment that shattered everything. Intimacy, raw and undeniable, laid out in black and white. Their correspondence detailed everything: hotel rendezvous, intimate exchanges, and the quiet whispers of financial arrangements that went far beyond any affair. The next folder held surveillance photographs, grainy and distant, but unmistakably clear in their meaning. I saw them together, casual car rides, the subtle but undeniable gestures that spoke of an intimacy I had never known. Each image a fragment of betrayal. But it was the final folder that delivered the crushing blow. Detailed spreadsheets, meticulously compiled, documenting substantial agency fund diversions. Each entry bore Nora's distinctive initials, her signature, her involvement, her calculated orchestration of it all. I collapsed back in my chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. My breath hitched as the room spun. My world tilted off its axis. This wasn't just about an affair. This was something far darker. A carefully constructed facade, woven over years of marriage, unraveled in an instant. Nora hadn't simply been unfaithful. She was a calculated deceiver, a master manipulator, wearing the mask of someone I thought I understood. I reached for the key card, the one that had once seemed so innocuous, and placed it beside the computer. My eyes fixed on it, my mind racing with its implications. This wasn't a random travel memento. This was a critical piece of her elaborate scheme, a clue I had almost missed, buried in plain sight. Reed had armed me with devastating ammunition. I was ready. But I knew patience would be my strategy. I couldn't let my rage dictate my next move. Every step needed to be calculated, precise. I would expose her lies, but on my terms. I'd let her return, confident in her deception, before systematically dismantling the carefully constructed world she'd so effortlessly built. I would mirror the destruction she had inflicted on mine, piece by agonizing piece. The USB drive remained on my desk, a silent, toxic witness to everything I'd uncovered. While Nora continued her Los Angeles charade, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing back in Seattle, I sat alone in my darkened apartment, bathed only by the faint glow of the city lights filtering through the window slats. Reed's proposition echoed in my mind. Delivering the evidence to Helix Media would certainly orchestrate her swift downfall, a clinical process that would keep me at a safe distance. But I wasn't ready for such a rapid conclusion. No, I needed more than that. I needed her to feel the weight of her own lies. I needed her to endure the mounting pressure, to taste the psychological torment she had subjected me to for far too long. The following morning, I began my plan subtly. I composed an encrypted message to Helix Media, carefully selecting the most incriminating evidence from the drive. One spreadsheet, bearing Nora's unmistakable signature, detailing the diversion of client funds. Accompanying it, a cryptic warning, *, verify your recent campaign expenditures. Additional information forthcoming, *. It was a small, strategic step, nothing too overt, but it was enough. Enough to plant a seed of doubt, to set the wheels in motion. I leaned back in my chair, fingers tapping absently on the desk as I awaited the fallout. I watched the message disappear into cyberspace, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Helix would investigate, but their process would take time I was more than willing to use to my advantage. This window allowed me to escalate the pressure, to watch as the foundation of Nora's carefully built world began to tremble. I scrolled through my phone contacts until I found Theo, an old university friend, now writing for a local creative platform. Theo was indebted to me for a favor I'd done him years ago, and I knew he'd owe me one for a long time. With a steady hand, I sent him a message, * got insider info. Jasper's running billing scams on clients. Worth investigating, *. Theo's response came within minutes, * intriguing. I'll get the ball rolling, *. Within hours, a cryptic post appeared on his blog, subtly questioning Jasper's professional integrity. No direct accusations, just enough insinuation to stir the pot within Seattle's tightly knit creative community. It was exactly the kind of tension I needed to start unraveling the threads of their collaboration. I allowed myself a satisfied smile, imagining Jasper's once confident expression crumbling as his client list began to dwindle, as whispers of doubt spread like wildfire. But this was far from over. My plan had only begun to take shape. I accessed my laptop again, the weight of the USB drive heavy in my mind. Navigating to the agency's internal audit system, I felt a sharp pang of guilt. Nora had shared her login credentials with me months ago, back when things were still honest between us, when there were no secrets between us. But now, those passwords were keys to unraveling her entire empire of deceit. Her oversight in not updating the password proved advantageous. I methodically searched through the system, eyes scanning the files like a predator hunting its prey, until I uncovered a series of expense reports linked to Jasper's photo shoots. The figures were inflated, the billing padded with false entries, just as I had suspected. I forwarded these anonymously to the audit department with a simple message, "Investigate thoroughly." I sat back in my chair, my fingers tingling with anticipation. As the hours passed, I continued weaving my web of consequences, each thread pulling tighter, every action a step closer to the moment when Nora would be forced to face the consequences of her betrayal. I wasn't done yet. I reached out to a familiar barista at Jasper's preferred Capitol Hill coffee spot, planting the seeds of doubt with a casual remark about rumors surrounding his questionable practices. It was a subtle move, but in a city like Seattle, whispers spread rapidly. By evening, I could sense the reverberations of my actions beginning to take effect. Nora would return tomorrow. She had no idea what awaited her. Stepping unknowingly into the carefully laid snares I had prepared for her, she would walk right into the storm I'd been quietly stirring. I let myself smirk at the thought. In the meantime, I kept myself busy. I prepared dinner, her favorite burger, the sizzling aroma filling the kitchen as the patty cooked. It was a gesture that, on the surface, seemed thoughtful, even loving. But beneath that facade, darker intentions simmered. The burger wasn't for her. It was for me, a calculated act of normalcy, a way to keep up appearances while I waited. I ate alone, each tasteless bite sinking into my stomach like the weight of everything I discovered. My thoughts weren't on the meal. They were on her return. When she finally arrived the following evening, suitcase in tow, I didn't rise to greet her. She looked tired, her face softer than when she'd left, but the moment she crossed the threshold, I could see the shift in her. She was walking right into the trap. I maintained my position on the couch, nursing a beer, pretending to focus on the flickering glow of the television. Her entrance told me everything I needed to know. Fatigue lined her features, and her usually neat ponytail was now a tangled mess. She looked like someone who had been living a lie for too long. "Hi," I offered casually, glancing up just briefly. "How was LA?" She dropped her shoes near the entrance, her movements drained, like the weight of the world had followed her back from the trip. "Happy to be home," she said softly, her voice betraying the exhaustion that lingered. I watched as she moved to the refrigerator, retrieving a bottle of water. Her hands shook slightly, an unconscious betrayal of her nervous energy. Was it possible that the Helix investigation had progressed faster than expected? Or was she simply acting out of habit, trying to keep up the illusion? I rose slowly from the couch, keeping my movements deliberate, my voice casual as I spoke. "Important meetings?" "Yeah," she replied, almost too quickly, taking a long gulp of water. "Just client work, nothing special." I didn't miss the way she hesitated, the subtle shift in her posture, as if she were waiting for the ground to shift beneath her feet. Her phone buzzed from the table, and she grabbed it hastily, tucking it away out of sight. I didn't react, choosing instead to retrieve the burger I had made for her earlier, now slightly cold from being left in the oven. "Made this for you," I said, keeping my tone light. "I thought you might be hungry." Her smile was strained, her eyes darting toward her phone before meeting mine. "Thanks, Caleb. You're wonderful." She sat down at the table, the uneaten burger before her, untouched, her eyes flickering to her phone with disturbing frequency. I kept my gaze fixed on her, the weight of everything unspoken hanging thick in the air. The facade she was clinging to, so fragile, so easily shattered. But I'd let her try. Let her think she still controlled the narrative. For now. That's when I caught it. Her fingers drummed nervously against the table, tapping an anxious pattern I hadn't seen before. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A rhythm of unease, a crack in her composure. I leaned casually against the counter, taking slow, deliberate sips from my beer, letting the silence stretch. "Everything all right?" I asked, voice level, calculated. She paused mid-chew, her eyes momentarily freezing. The air between us thickened, and she shook her head, brushing it off. "Just exhausted," she murmured, dismissing it with a forced smile. I nodded in understanding. "Long journey," I said, but my gaze never left her. I was watching her unravel, piece by piece, her carefully constructed image slowly peeling away. And she had no idea that I was the one holding the threads. Over the next few days, I ratcheted up the pressure. Helix had responded enthusiastically, eager for more evidence, and I delivered. Another portion of the USB data was released, this time revealing email exchanges between Nora and Jasper, conspiring to funnel fraudulent payments through a fake vendor. Every new revelation felt like a step closer to the final piece of the puzzle. Theo's blog post had ignited the fires of online discussion, and now, Jasper's name was being dragged through the mud. Negative attention was mounting, and a message popped up from a mutual contact. "What's the story with Jasper getting blacklisted?" it asked. I feigned ignorance, playing the part of the uninformed, while inside, I savored the feeling of control. The pieces were aligning perfectly. Nora, though, was starting to feel the heat. She returned late one evening, her face pale, eyes glued to her phone as if she could will away the storm approaching. She gripped the device tightly, her fingers trembling. The facade was crumbling, and she had no idea who was behind it. She barely acknowledged me as she entered, mumbling about a difficult day before retreating to our bedroom. I followed a few moments later, claiming I needed to grab a charger. The excuse was flimsy, but it was enough to get me close. Her laptop was open on the bed, a flurry of urgent emails flooding the screen. I saw one, just a glimpse, before she hastily closed it. The subject line caught my eye, urgent audit review. Our gazes met, hers wide with alarm, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice brittle, on edge. "Just grabbing my charger," I replied, holding up the cord, letting the innocence in my tone settle over the room. I watched her eyes flicker down to the charger, and she eased slightly, but the tension remained, thick in the air. "Sorry," she whispered, almost distracted, "work's chaotic." I nodded, offering a brief smile before leaving the room, my pulse hammering in my chest. The audit team was closing in. Helix was circling, and the walls were beginning to close in on her. I kept the pressure steady, subtle but deliberate. A casual comment here, a carefully timed suggestion there. One of her former clients got a message from me, asking about concerns over potential financial irregularities. It was a gentle nudge, just enough to make her start questioning, making her doubting her own stability. And I watched, quietly, as she compulsively checked her phone, each glance a silent admission that the cracks were starting to show. Her fingernails were chewed raw, her laughter a thing of the past. One evening, as I stood in the kitchen, she confronted me quietly, her voice laced with uncertainty. "Have you heard anything strange about work? About me?" I cocked my head, feigning puzzlement, letting the confusion flicker across my features. "What kind of things?" She hesitated, studying my expression with a wariness I hadn't seen before. Her gaze wavered, the weight of her thoughts pressing down. Finally, she muttered, "Never mind. Forget it," but her eyes remained on me, filled with a deep, gnawing fear and doubt. That night, I slept on the couch, the key card pressing into my pocket like a constant reminder of the trap I was setting. She thought she could conceal everything, her lies, her betrayal, treating me like a naive pawn in her twisted game while she and Jasper shared their whispered secrets. But now, that world was crumbling. Helix had gathered enough evidence to expose her. The audit team was closing in, relentless in their pursuit. Jasper's reputation was slowly unraveling, the once powerful photographer now a figure of ridicule in the industry. I had meticulously constructed this trap, every move, every word, and every bit of evidence placed with precision. She hadn't known it yet, but she was already cornered. All that remained was to choose the right moment to spring the trap, to watch her unravel as the truth came crashing down. The air in our home had thickened, suffocating, laden with unspoken accusations, the silence between us pregnant with the weight of what I knew and what she had yet to realize. Nora barely rested anymore. Her restless footsteps echoed through the apartment until dawn, a constant reminder of her unraveling composure. I kept my distance, observing her gradual breakdown from afar, a silent witness to her anxiety, to the cracks forming in the facade she'd so carefully constructed. Helix Media had everything they needed now: the documentation, the proof, and the auditors were closing in like predators, sensing vulnerability. Jasper's reputation, once revered in the creative community, had dissolved completely, his opportunities evaporating as quickly as morning mist. I had orchestrated it all with precision, but the final act, the moment of truth, required something more personal. Something that would make her face the full extent of her betrayal. I needed to confront her with her actions, not just through cold emails or hidden files, but face to face, in a space that held memories of better times, before everything became a web of lies. I chose the location with deliberate care. Pike Place Market, a vibrant maze of vendors and coffee shops, a place we had once frequented during the early, happier days of our marriage. It was the perfect contrast, a place brimming with life yet steeped in nostalgia, where the memories of our past would hang heavy in the air. I sent her a message that morning, intentionally vague, just enough to provoke curiosity and concern. Meet at the cafe near the fish vendors, noon. Important discussion needed. Her response came swiftly, curt. Okay. The simplicity of it spoke volumes, her resignation clear in those 2 letters. I arrived early, securing an outdoor table where the salty harbor breeze mingled with the rich scent of freshly brewed coffee. The world buzzed around me, vendors calling out their prices, tourists snapping photos, the occasional burst of laughter from groups of friends. Yet, in the midst of it all, I felt the heavy weight of anticipation, knowing that this would be the moment she'd finally confront everything. The crowd flowed around us, oblivious to the impending confrontation unfolding just beyond their awareness. I placed the USB drive on the table, its dark surface stark against the aged wood, a subtle but significant symbol of the storm that was about to break. I waited, allowing the ambient noise of the market to fill the space between us, while my heart beat steadily, the only sign of my internal tension. Nora arrived precisely on schedule, wrapped tightly in her coat against the crisp fall air. She looked drained, dark circles beneath her eyes, her usual polished appearance now showing signs of fatigue and strain. There was a certain fragility to her now, the woman who once had complete control over every situation, now looking like she was barely holding it together. She sat across from me, her posture rigid, avoiding direct eye contact. The silence hung between us like a heavy shroud before she spoke. "What's this about, Caleb?" Her voice was thin, like it might break at any moment. I didn't respond immediately, just letting the weight of the moment settle around us. Then, with deliberate slowness, I slid the USB drive toward her. Her hands twitched, betraying her unease, but she didn't reach for it. I leaned forward slightly, resting my arms on the table, and met her gaze with an unwavering stare. "Open it." My command was simple, flat, and devoid of any emotion that might give her any false comfort. "See for yourself." She hesitated, her eyes flicking between me and the drive, before her fingers, trembling just slightly, wrapped around it. She retrieved a sleek tablet from her bag and connected the drive, her movements slow and uncertain. The device buzzed to life, and I watched her face intently as the files loaded. When the first image appeared on the screen, her breath caught audibly. It was the first crack in her carefully maintained composure. Her eyes widened for the briefest moment, and I could see the realization hit her, like a wave, drowning the carefully constructed lies. A snapshot of her and Jasper intertwined in a hotel lobby filled the screen, his arm casually draped around her waist, a picture of intimacy that cut deeper than any physical wound. Her fingers moved frantically, swiping through a sea of emails and financial records. Each document, every damning detail I had painstakingly provided to Helix and the auditors, slowly unfurled the web of her betrayal. The color drained from her face, leaving her as pale as the seabirds circling overhead. I watched her carefully, my gaze unwavering. She finally lifted her eyes to meet mine, her expression a mixture of shock and something far darker. Her mouth moved silently, but no words came. "Tell me," I said, my voice slicing through the market's chaotic hum, sharp and cold. "How long did you think this deception would last?" She recoiled slightly, clutching the tablet like a shield, as though the device could somehow protect her from the storm she had created. "Caleb, let me explain," she pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. I didn't let her finish. Sliding a folded document across the table, I cut her off. It was a resignation letter I had carefully crafted the previous night, bearing her forged signature. "Resign," I stated flatly. "Do it today, or this information reaches the media and law enforcement by sunset." Her eyes widened in horror, her breath catching. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered, as if hoping I was bluffing. I moved closer, lowering my voice just enough for her to hear, my words steady, deliberate. "Test me." She alternated between staring at the resignation letter and my face, the weight of the choice pressing down on her. I could see the internal struggle playing out in her eyes, but there was no room for mercy now. The gravity of the situation began to sink in, and I could see it in her eyes, tears welling up, but I remained unmoved. The harsh truth was that her decisions had led us here, long before this moment. She reached for the resignation letter with trembling hands, shoving the paper and the tablet into her bag. "I'm so sorry," she whispered through her tears, standing so quickly that the chair scraped loudly against the concrete. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to. She was already gone, both physically and, in a way, emotionally. She stumbled away through the crowd, her back disappearing behind a veil of people. The USB drive still clutched in my hand. I stayed seated, my fingers tightening around the coffee cup. The bitter taste matched the cold satisfaction that lingered in my chest, a sense of finality settling over me. By Monday, the consequences were swift and devastating. Nora's resignation made its way to the agency, but that couldn't prevent the storm that had already been set in motion. Helix Media released the story to a well-known industry publication, complete with the irrefutable evidence and financial analysis I'd provided. The fallout was immediate. Nora's name became synonymous with corporate caution, and no one in the agency wanted to be associated with her. The audit team, emboldened by the media exposure, dug deeper and uncovered even more incriminating details than I had shared. It wasn't long before Nora was terminated, her career hanging by the thinnest of threads. But the damage didn't stop there. Jasper, too, faced the consequences of his actions. Lawsuits piled up, with 2 clients accusing him of fraudulent billing. His reputation in the creative community crumbled, the once celebrated photographer now a cautionary tale for anyone who dared to cross the line. The world they had carefully built fell apart, and all I had to do was watch as the pieces scattered, one by one. His work was wiped clean from every major platform, his reputation disintegrating like dust in the wind. I wasted no time in taking the next step. Divorce proceedings began that same week. A discreet attorney was hired, someone who would ensure the process remained as private as possible. The legal documents found Nora at her mother's house in Tacoma, where she had sought refuge after the scandal erupted. Unable to stay in the apartment any longer, its walls steeped in memories that now felt suffocating, I sold it. The boxes, his and mine, all packed up and ready to go, were stacked high, a silent testament to a life I was leaving behind. Denver, a city far enough removed to promise a clean slate, would become my new home. Nora reached out one last time. Her voice, trembling with desperation, came through the phone, trying to justify her actions, to explain away the irreversible damage. I didn't let her finish. I severed the call mid-plea, permanently blocking her number. She had lost everything that mattered. Her career. Her standing in the industry. And, most importantly, us. Jasper, too, seemed to disappear. Whispers floated through the grapevine, suggesting he had found refuge behind a bar in some forgotten town. I never bothered to confirm the rumors. I didn't need to. It was irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was that they were both gone from my life. In Denver, I rebuilt methodically, piece by piece. The majestic Rockies framed my new perspective, their towering peaks standing as silent witnesses to my transformation. The mountain air was fresh and crisp, carrying with it a clarity that I had never known before. The silence wasn't oppressive, it was healing. I secured a position at a promising startup, a place where the work was challenging, the people were genuine, and there was no room for past deceptions. It was a new chapter, one I wrote with my own hands, free of the lies that once bound me. The old security badge remained buried in a drawer, a relic I couldn't quite bring myself to discard, but one I preferred to forget. Nora had thought she could outrun the truth, building a kingdom of lies with Jasper as her co-conspirator. But deceit, no matter how carefully constructed, always crumbles in the face of reality. Her empire was never meant to last, it had been doomed from the start. And so, the story concludes here. Did the ending meet your expectations, or did it take you by surprise? Share your thoughts below, and if this tale resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and we'll see you in the next adventure. The ending provides a sense of finality and a subtle justice for the protagonist's journey, wrapping up the chaos that Nora's betrayal caused. It leaves us with the question of whether revenge or the restoration of order is truly satisfying. It hits a nice balance of reflection and closure while leaving us with a lingering thought. What did you think?